Our 8.5-mile loop around Elliott Bay. If you didn't know, folks, we've been doing this particular loop for quite some time, dating all the way back to 1949 when we got our start as the Spring Street Water Taxi Service. We were founded by a man named Captain Lynn Campbell, who started this company just bringing people back and forth from like the Kitsap Peninsula to Bainbridge, Bremerton, anywhere they needed to go. Not unlike our Washington State ferries that we saw pulling out of the dock as we also got underway there. But what the difference between the ferries and what Lynn Campbell was doing was that people were actually electing to stay on board even after they had reached their final destination. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a taxi company now, does it? And that's because Lynn Campbell, much like myself, was quite the talker. He would just talk on and on about anything he knew about the city, be it its culture, its current events, its history, etc. And people loved it, flocking to the Seattle Harbor Tour that changed its name to Seattle Harbor Tours in '51, just a couple of years after they started as a Spring Street Water Taxi Service, and always operating out of Pier 55, which is a dock that we just got underway from. Now with that, folks, it looks we are going to go ahead and start our tour with the first thing on our right side. That is going to be the Great Seattle Wheel. Now you no doubt saw this wheel on your way over here to Pier 55. It's pretty hard to miss because it's over 175 feet tall, and it stands at Miners Landing. Now Miners Landing is in reference to a very important historical event here where the steamship Portland landed here in these very docks with reportedly over a ton of gold. Now that was a little bit of a misconstrue. It wasn't over a ton of gold. It was over 2 tons of gold on board. So that got the whole country excited and trying to board one of these vessels to head all the way up to Alaska to try and partake during the Klondike Gold Rush. Now you can imagine Alaska is pretty chilly up there, and very many people were, shall we say, ill prepared for that kind of weather. Because of that, Canadian Mounties were constantly saving people over and over again from those aforementioned harsh climates. And they just got sick and tired of it, to the point where they have put together a rule that you have to have an entire year's worth of supplies before you even think about boarding one of these boats and heading all the way up to Alaska. Now, where do you buy those supplies? Why not in the last stop, the gateway to Alaska, the city of Seattle itself? That's how Seattle became a major metropolitan area and how it's got its big economic boom. Now, moving on to a little bit more modern day piers, though, we also have off here to the right the Seattle Aquarium at Pier 59. The Seattle Aquarium is also included in your city pass, so if you bought that, it will also get you into there, and I highly recommend choosing the Seattle Aquarium because they have so much beautiful marine wildlife there. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, the giant Pacific octopus, which gets its name because of just how massive it is. The highest recorded wingspan of one of these magnificent creatures is about 35 feet. To give you an idea of how big that is, it could touch both ends of this boat, left to right, if it really wanted to. Almost wrapping around us like the mythological Kraken. But we also have a lot more fuzzy creatures there as well. We, of course, have the sea otters. Those sea otters are super adorable, and they're plastered all over the marketing on the outside because they know what people like to see. Those sea otters are super cute, and we have one over there named Mishka. Now, Mishka was experiencing a little issues back in 2015. If you guys remember, there were a bunch of wildfires that were happening during that time, mostly coming from Southern California, that brought in a ton of smoke into our own atmosphere and subsequently found its way into poor Mishka's lungs and caused her to develop asthma. Now, this was, of course, very, very sad when this happened. However, there is a happy ending to this story. Because she was so intelligent and the workers were so patient with her, they were able to train her how to use her own inhaler. They gave her a modified cat inhaler, and to this very day, she's able to medically serve herself whenever she's having an issue. She just waddles on up to it, sticks her nose onto it, and presses the button, and she is good to go. Now, the next thing on our tour is a little bit challenging to point out from the waterfront itself, but let me get a show of hands. How many of you folks have already been to Pike Place Market? Good number of you. Now, let me ask a little harder question. How many of you have been to all 5 levels of Pike Place Market? Significantly fewer. Good job to those of you whose hands are up, but to everyone else, can you say that you went to the Space Needle if you only experienced 20% of it? No, exactly. You have to go back to Pike Place Market because you only experience a fraction of what they have available. Go and check out the lower levels. I implore you to go and find those staircases, those elevators. Go and check out. There's often plaques on the walls of the stores telling you how long their families have been there. It's oftentimes multiple generations. There's a cool old style comic book store, an old record store, antique coin shop. Lots of cool places to go and check out. Go ahead and go down those stairs. Check out Pike Place Market again. A little bit of a history lesson. Pike Place was started all the way back in 1907 when a bunch of factories were buying up the entire farmer supply of onions to the point where everybody in Seattle would have to pay $29 for a single onion. Absolutely ludicrous. Nobody wants to pay that kind of price. So because of that, they begged the farmers to come out, and in March of 1907, Pike Place Market's been running strong as one of the biggest markets in the entire country ever since. And it oftentimes competes with the Space Needle for the most photographed place in all of Washington. And that is not just Seattle taken into account, that is all of Washington. Now, I guess I should go ahead and address the metaphorical elephant in the room that has appeared here on the right side. There's absolutely pretty massive cruise ship here, but this is one of the smallest cruise ships I've seen in a while. Usually they can get over 1,000 feet. Now, what you're seeing tied up to the side of the cruise ship is actually a fueling boat. Do you see how it says double on the side of it, the Nathan Schmidt there? That's because there's a secondary hole to house the fuel that it carries. It's a very dirty kind of marine grade diesel, and they don't want that to fall into the water. So what they do is they have a secondary hole on the inside that's meant to house the fuel, so if they ever run aground, puncture the hole in any way, instead of all that fuel spilling into the water, they'll just spill into the other hole instead, which is really important because that barge is holding about 5 to 7 million gallons of that diesel fuel that I talked about. That's that bunker fuel. And they need to fuel up that cruise ship so it can get underway and heading all the way up to Alaska, sort of recurring the city's history as once again being the gateway to Alaska. The only difference between the gold rush and now is that instead of going up to make your fortune, you're instead paying a small fortune to actually get on one of these boats and go all the way up there. We're not just a cruise ship destination though, we also are of course a destination in and of ourselves. We have the Hotel Edgewater here, one of the best hotels in the entire city, if not the most unique in the entire city. And that's because of the pretty obvious gimmick of them being a pier and a hotel at the same time. If you're having trouble spotting it, it's this gray building with the big red E on top that is facing all sides. Even a couple of people out there on their balconies checking us out as we go along. Now the Edgewater it has a really interesting set of history to it. It was built in 1962. Does anybody here know any other famous thing that was happening here in Seattle during '62? I heard it a couple times, the World's Fair. That is exactly right. The World's Fair took place here in '62. That's the same time that the Space Needle was being built, and that was no coincidence. The Edgewater wanted to get some of the foot traffic of over 9 million people that were coming to the city during that time. The only problem is, it's pretty challenging to build a hotel on the pier with that really unique gimmick, and unfortunately after construction delay, the Edgewater ended up opening its doors 3 weeks after everyone had already left. Really unfortunate for the Edgewater. That's a really high margin to miss, over 9 million people. So because of that, they were paying back several loans and they almost went bankrupt several times until in '64, they were saved by a famous rock band that ended up staying in it. Does anyone know what famous '60s rock band stayed in that hotel? I heard it a couple times, the Beatles. That is exactly right. The Beatles did stay there in '64, and they took that iconic photo that you guys have probably seen of them fishing out the side of the window, which then circulated all over magazines, newspapers, you name it, it was everywhere. And people saw the other major gimmick of the Edgewater being able to fish outside of your window. The only problem is management never actually expected anyone to really catch anything, but catch things they did. And that really causes a problem, and it doesn't exactly take long to figure out why. If you're a guest on the bottom floor and your upstairs neighbor happens to be an avid fisherman, well, the prime time for fishing here in Seattle is about 5 o'clock in the morning. So your wake-up call has just transformed into the sound of a 10-pound salmon slapping up against the side of your window. not fantastic, and not exactly a 5-star experience. So because of that, it was a constant war between the cleaning services and of course guest services and management, who wanted to keep that gimmick going as long as possible. Eventually, management ended up folding, and they ended up removing fishing at the Edgewater Hotel. It's no longer allowed to happen at all. But they kept a hold on it for about 20 years, even after the Beatles had left. I have another historic pier I want to point out to you folks. Off here to the right is Pier 70. This is one of the most historic piers here because some of the pilings that you see that are holding up that pier are the original ones that were built all the way back in the early 1900s when it was originally built. Still holding strong to this very day. Now, Pier 70 is also famous for being the Center for Liquor Control Board all the way back in Prohibition era. If you go there nowadays, you'll find an Irish pub. Really gives you an idea of Seattle's changing priorities here. Now, just past Pier 70, of course, if you look just above it, you'll find the iconic, of course, Space Needle. Now, this is going to be the closest and most unobstructed view that you'll be getting of the Space Needle on our entire tour. And I implore you to take a couple of pictures. You're not restricted to your seats, folks. If you want to get up and move around to get a better shot of it, you are absolutely welcome to do so. I will be talking about the Space Needle, do not worry. However, I will be talking about it a little bit later. Thankfully, it's easy to see no matter where we are on the tour, and I like to talk about things that are a little bit more time limited. Starting with directly beneath the Space Needle, you'll see that there is a park where there's a bunch of people walking around, and that big red sculpture right there in the middle. That is of an eagle. It's based on Pacific Northwest and a Native American design as part of Olympic Sculpture Park. It's a little abstract though for my liking. So because of that, it's not my favorite sculpture in the park. My favorite sculpture, believe it or not, is the park itself. And you look, you can see how it is one. Do you see how there's a difference between the two shades of grass there, separated by that concrete barrier? One side is a lot lighter and more yellow. The other side is that more dark, luscious green. This is actually meant to represent Washington State's climate. Of course, eastern Washington is more famous for being a plateau desert, whereas the more luscious evergreen Washington on the other side of the Cascade Mountains is, of course, over here. And that concrete barrier is meant to represent those Cascade Mountains that actually divide both the park and, of course, the state itself. I think it's extremely clever, and I love how they did it. Now, stretching just past Olympic Sculpture Park, you're going to see just along the waterfront here, there's a bunch of like loose logs, some gravel, loose sediment, and whatnot. This is what Seattleites like to call a beach, or about the closest thing we can get to a beach in the main city. If you want a more standard beach, Alki Beach is probably going to be your best bet. But this is about all you can get in the main city of Seattle itself. Just past the beach, though, we of course have this other park that's a long, thin park that stretches along the entire rest of the waterfront here. This is Myrtle Edwards Park, and if you've ever seen Parks and Rec, Myrtle Edwards was basically like our Leslie Knope here in Seattle. She was noticing that post-World's Fair, Seattle was starting to become a very concrete jungle. Big, high-rise buildings, lots of concrete, lots of steel, but not a whole lot of green. And she did not want that to become Seattle's legacy. So, using her powers as a city councilwoman, she decided to put together a city ordinance. This city ordinance read that every single person in Seattle would have a park within 10 minutes of walking distance of wherever they lived, period. Nowadays, Seattle has one of the most parks per capita of any United States city, having over 480 parks just in the main city itself. Myrtle Edwards just being one of them, but there's a lot more unique parks. There's some that are just tiny little block-wide parks. There's also a massive park called Discovery Park, which is just a little bit north of here. If you're looking for a good place to hike, that place has over 12 miles of trails. Looking for a hiking place, look up Discovery Park. It's just a little bit north of here, not even that far of a drive. Now you also have, if you ask me, my favorite park in the entire city is actually going to be Cary Park. If you're looking for where it is, it's actually just the top of this hill over here. You see these 3 radio towers coming out of the top of that hill there? That's Queen Anne Hill, and at the top of the hill is going to be Cary Park, known by locals as Postcard Park, because you can get an absolutely gorgeous view of the entire city. Any postcard that is worth its salt is going to be taken atop of that park. You can see the entirety of the city, the skyline, the Space Needle, the mountains if it's a clear enough day, and of course the waterfront, all of which from one shot. It's absolutely beautiful up there. If you only go to one park in the entire city, make it Cary Park. Now, if you're looking at the top of the hill there and thinking, that looks a little bit familiar, you're probably a fan of some doctor TV shows that take place here in Seattle. I'm of course referring to Frasier and Grey's Anatomy. I'll start with Frasier. If you remember remember in the show, he has this like crazy high-rise, rich kind of doctor salary condo at the very top of Queen Anne Hill. So if you look towards the top, in the middle of the 3 radio towers there, squint your eyes a little bit, and you'll be able to see Fraser's apartment is not there at all. It doesn't exist. It's entirely fabricated. It was just made in Hollywood, just some movie magic for you folks. But what does exist, I do have some good news for my Grey's Anatomy friends, because unfortunately none of Frasier was filmed here in the city. Only the 100th episode kind of as an anniversary special. But I do have much better news for our Grey's Anatomy fans, because up on top of that hill is going to be Meredith Grey's house that was used in the exterior shots of the show. I can't tell you exactly where it is though, because it is a private residence. So if you do go there, I just recommend keeping your distance, keeping a block away, take your pictures from say across the street or so, respect their privacy. But now we're coming up on these absolutely massive white silos over here to the right side of the boat. Anybody here from the Midwest by chance? I see a couple people in the back, some people in the front here. Are you guys able to identify what's inside those silos? Any idea? No, it's actually going to be cattle-grade grain, which is our biggest export in the entire city. And I've really probably surprised a good number of you, because if you can go around the entire city, you will not find a single grain farm. We do not have the climate for it. Instead, it's actually grown by you folks out there in the Midwest and brought over here by train and then stored in those giant silos over there. There's over 60 of those silos that can hold up to 4 million bushels of grain, which then be loaded up onto that elevator shaft and dropped onto a bulk carrier, which is this massive 1,000-foot vessel that would be very obvious if it was actually there, but it's not there right now. Now, grain is a little bit volatile when you move it, especially when it's raining out. If it gets rained on, it will get soggy and moldy and wet and completely unusable, so you have to throw out the entire batch. Then why on earth would you bring it all the way up to Seattle, one of the most notorious cities for how much rain it gets? That's actually due to the curvature of the Earth. Because of the way it's curved, we're an entire day closer to our biggest business partner, and that is China. So whenever they want to do business with the United States, they're most likely going to be picking the port of Seattle. Saves them a ton of time on fuel costs, shipping costs, and of course manpower, all of that at the same time. Because of that, it just makes more sense in the long run to actually just bring it all the way up to Seattle and then deal with the rain afterwards. We're not just famous for our exporting and importing, though. We also have plenty of tech industry. We're, of course, famous for having Microsoft and Amazon, but I bet you didn't know we also had Expedia. And their campus is right over here to the right side. This large campus you see off here to the right is owned by Expedia. They just bought this place out for $229 million, moving over from Bellevue, Washington. They bought it in 2019, and some of the cool amenities they have out there are some of the rocks that you see on the campus exterior are actually fake and meant to house Wi-Fi signals for the employees inside. The idea being is that if you're experiencing a wonderful day and you want to just take your laptop, your phone, your tablet, whatever you're planning on work with, head on outside, enjoy the beautiful sunshine Seattle has to offer. The only problem is they built this place in 2019 for a slated opening of March of 2020. Because they figured that out pretty quickly and ended up just sticking with the top instead. It's unknown whether or not they're going to keep the entirety of that, they're going to keep the entire top of that to that galaxy gold color, but I kind of hope they do, because in the last couple of months, it really grew on me, and I hope that just becomes the staple of the Space Needle. Nice gold at the very, very top. Now, the Space Needle may not look like a particularly structurally sound building, but that's actually completely untrue. It's actually one of the sturdiest buildings in the entire skyline, and that's thanks to the foundation that rides beneath the building. It gives it a center of gravity only about 15 feet off the ground. If you take the foundation into account, it nearly doubles the length of the tower. There's so much foundation there, it makes it incredibly sturdy. It can withstand up to 200 mile per hour winds and 9.0 earthquakes. So the Space Needle is not going anywhere anytime soon. If you do go and visit the Space Needle, and I really hope you do, you'll find that there are 3 major floors you're going to be visiting. There's a boarding area for the elevators, not too exciting, but those 5 elevators will take you all the way up to the top, where the second floor has a rotating bar. You can go, have a drink, have a seat, find you're doing a slow, gradual rotation around the entire building. Really cool way to see the city from the luxury of the Space Needle itself. There's also a glass floor up there, so you can look down and around and see everybody walking around in the Seattle Center directly beneath you. Now, Space Needle, when it was built all the way back in '62, was of course the tallest building in our entire skyline. It doesn't hold that title anymore, though, unfortunately. That being said, there is still a city ordinance that you cannot build large buildings around the Space Needle to kind of give it the illusion of being much taller than it actually is, especially from the waterfront. The actual tallest building is the Columbia Center Tower. It's the big black monolithic building all the way on the other end of the skyline, the big black one all the way to the right of the skyline there. I know what some of you are thinking, what about that kind of glassy rectangular looking building in the middle? That one looks like it could be the tallest. Well, don't be fooled. It's built on top of a hill, and that's cheating. So we don't count it. The actual tallest building is that Columbia Center Tower, all the way over there to the right. It's 997 feet tall, just a couple of feet shy of that very satisfying 1,000-foot number. But oh, is there a good reason they did not hit it? I'm sure you saw there were multiple planes going over the top of the skyline just as we were talking about the skyline itself, and that exists in Seattle airspace, exactly 1,000 feet off the ground. Now, the Columbia Center didn't exactly know about this, or they didn't respect it, because they put their blueprint slated to build the building about 1,020 feet, and ran into some issues with the Federal Aviation Administration, who said that while what you're doing is not technically illegal, we still have two major airports to the south of you, both of which are going to be seeing constant air traffic in and out. SeaTac International Airport and Boeing Airfield, both of which seeing lots of traffic, and we are going to charge you for every single flight that must be redirected around your building because of how tall it is. You can imagine nobody at the Columbia Center had budgeted for a literal infinite money sink. That would hold true to this very day. So they rushed back to the drawing board as quick as possible, panicked and tried to cut off a couple floors off the top, but they were notified that they had already sold out every single one of their floors to other companies expecting their office space, and they cannot breach contract. What do they do now? Well, the only thing they could do, they decided to cut 6 inches off of every single floor, leading all the way up to the top. And it shrunk the building down like an accordion and made it fit within the zoning laws, and they received no further issues. That being said, because of the number of floors compared to how tall the building is, it is the shortest, tallest building on the entire West Coast. It's especially funny when you consider the Space Needle has the exact opposite problem, only having 5 floors for the entire 605-foot structure. Speaking back to the Space Needle, though, get a good long look at it and see it. It is exactly 605 feet tall at the very tip. Now I want you to imagine dropping it into the water, and it would completely disappear. The water that we're on right now is about 600 feet deep on average, and it gets worse the further out you go, getting really, really deep, upwards of 1,000 feet. That's why you don't see bridges being built anywhere. It makes more sense to have our Washington State ferries go to and from places like Bainbridge, which is kind of like a bedroom community, which is off that starboard side there, just underneath those little mountains. And where that seaplane is flying to, that's going to be Bainbridge Island. Most people who live out in Bainbridge use one of those Washington State ferries sort of as a marine highway and drive all the way over to the main center of Seattle, where they'll end up going to work and then boarding one of those ferries all the way back. If you want to try this out yourself, Bainbridge is a really cool place to visit, and everything you're going to want to do is within a 10-minute walk from the ferry terminal itself. If you just remember Island and go over to the ferry terminal over at Coleman Docks, you can board one of those ferries for about $9.50 round trip, head on out to Bainbridge Island, and then you can hop right back on whenever you want. You already paid for the round trip. Now with that, folks, it looks like we are just about halfway through our tour, so I'm going to go ahead and jump off the mic for just a little bit. This is going to be a good time to get up, stretch, use the restroom, grab another drink from the bar, or better yet, ask me any questions. I'm going to be walking around for the next couple of minutes or so, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or chat with you, anything more you want to learn about with Seattle. If you have anything, feel free to flag me down. My name is Sean, and I'll see you guys in about 5 or so minutes. enjoyed that little break. We're gonna jump right back into it now. Starting off with our right side, starboard side, if you will. There's gonna be these kind of gray U-shaped structures here. They have a bunch of boats inside of them. These are dry docks and their sides are completely hollow. You can open up a valve and it will cause all the water to fill these dry docks, cause them to sink into the water, and then they can use tugboats and lines to push and pull a boat into the dry dock itself and then lift it out of the water. It makes it high and dry. If you ever heard that saying before, now you know exactly where it comes from. It comes from these dry docks. They have a contract with the Washington State Ferries. As you can see, one of them is out of the water entirely. But there's also the Cape St. George. That is a guided missile cruiser for the United States Navy. Vigor Shipyard also has a contract with the Navy. But there's also that really crazy looking vessel that's covered up by tarp and other metal pieces there. That is in fact the USS Omaha, which is an incredibly powerful littoral combat vessel. Littoral means land to sea. And that's because it only has a draft of about 14 feet. If you don't know boating terms, that means it can operate in waters as shallow as 16 feet of depth and still go at full speeds. Now, what are those full speeds? Somewhere around 55 miles per hour or more. We don't exactly know the max speed because the Navy doesn't exactly go around shouting off the specifications of their vessels. They want to keep a couple things under the hood. So because of that, that's just its highest recorded speed, although I bet for my money it can go a lot faster than that. And that's because of its 4 jet engines that it has on the back. It's incredibly powerful, and it can go to those ridiculous speeds while still being stable. It has what's called a trimaran-like design. We are a monohull. This vessel up here to the left, one of our Kitsap ferries, that's a catamaran, so it has 2 hulls. You can only imagine what a trimaran is. It has 3 of them. So it's basically like an M shape. 3 contact points with the water makes it a lot more stable as it reaches those insane speeds. Now, Vigor Shipyard is connected to this massive island we see up here to the right. Although it is massive, it's relatively flat. And if you spent any time in Seattle, you've been going up and down numerous hills, probably tiring your poor ankles out. And that is because, well, Seattle is very hilly, and this place is not. It is an artificial island. It's an entirely man-made island built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers all the way back in 1909. When it was made, it was the biggest man-made island in the entire world. Nowadays, it's just the largest one in the United States, as the largest one exists is in Dubai instead. Connected to Harbor Island, though, where that tugboat is to the right of our boats and to a little bit astern of us, you'll see that is a fueling dock. I imagine that tugboat is getting a little bit of extra fuel. That's Maxim Petroleum. And even vessels like the Salish Explorer will go over there, get a touch-up on fuel so that they can go and operate. But what do you do with a vessel like this off to the left? You told I have no idea how to pronounce that vessel, but it's a big boat. How do you tie that up to a dock that tiny to get some extra fuel? The simple answer is you don't. It is too big, it's not going to be able to. Instead, you're going to have those bunker barges I talked about earlier, and we can see more of them over here to the right. Now, those bunker barges, as we saw before, have no form of propulsion whatsoever. They need a tugboat to assist them, and we have the Crowley fleet right over here to the right side. Now, the Crowley fleet are signified by their red, white, and black colors. Pretty much every tugboat company here has a signature color scheme, so even if you do not speak, if you're a captain that does not speak English or don't even know the companies, you can just look at the tugboats and know which ones you are going to be working with in order to bring your boat in. The tugboats themselves are very powerful. They have something called twin cycloidal propulsion. It's basically 2 egg beaters down in the center of the vessel that spin around and let you go any which direction you please. You can go left ways, right ways, diagonally, even spinning in place, rotating, if you will, all of which you can do at full speed. There's also a special type of bunker barge called an ATB, articulated tug and barge. And that's basically when a barge has a snap built exactly for one tugboat that is able to snap into the back like a Lego piece. If you want to see what it looks like, look off to the right here. There's one of those Crowley tugboats that's snapped into the back. It gives them a lot more maneuverability than kind of driving along the hip, which is when they drive along the side of it. Now when this happens, they have to change their light fixtures and all the other Coast Guard compliance to be able to signify that they are a single vessel rather than a secondary vessel that is tied to the side of it. But now, folks, we're going to be heading into the Eastern Waterway. Oh, real quick before I forget, if you see that black and yellow line that's kind of circling the entirety of that tugboat there, that's a fuel boom. That's so if any of that fuel spills out, it'll stay within one area. It's dense enough that it'll float up to the top of the surface and keep within that area. They really don't want that fuel to spill out. But now we're heading into the Eastern Waterway now, and you really get to see the underbelly of the maritime industry here in Seattle. Starting off with these absolutely huge gantry cranes off to the right and left of our boat. These gantry cranes are about 200 feet tall, and that's with the arm completely flat. If the arm is fully extended, they're up to 400 feet tall, which makes this next fact all the more impressive. As you see them right now is how they came here. They are not disassembled in any way whatsoever to be brought over here. They're assembled over at a place called Crane Island off the coast of China, very aptly named, and then it is brought over here in one piece, exactly as you see it now on bulk carriers, then dropped off here in Seattle so they can get to work. Now, if you want to spot the pilot of this massive crane here, you can follow the cables up from the arm itself. Follow those cables up, and you'll spot a little glass box. If you're having trouble finding it, picture this thing as a giant white giraffe, and look where the stomach of the giraffe would be, and you'll find where that pilot house is. Now, a single person will be operating this. They are known as the longshoremen. The longshoremen have a pretty tough job of looking between their feet and knees for the entirety of their shift to be able to play the world's highest stakes game of claw machine. Except instead of dropping a $2 stuffed animal, you could be dropping up to millions of dollars worth of product that could be weighing over tons. Now, because they have to look between their feet and knees, you can imagine it gets pretty strenuous on the eyes and the mind. So because of that, they never work more than 2 to 6 hour shifts. A typical day will look like 2 hours on the dock, 2 hours up at the crane, back and forth until the day is finished. We are also passing by one of these container ships off to the right. It looks like they just deployed one of their emergency life ships, probably just testing it out to make sure it still works. They do drills all the time. It's that little orange boat, the port side of their vessel and the starboard of ours. Pretty interesting to see them actually deploy it. I haven't seen that in my entire year and a half working here. I haven't actually seen them run their drills and deploy those lifeboats. Now, if you look just above that lifeboat, you also see the longshoremen in full operation, putting things onto the vessel. It takes about 90 seconds for them to take a crane, either take a crane off or put it back on, respectively. You can imagine they really want to stay efficient with that. For every crate that you see on top of the vessel, there's probably one, maybe even 2 more of them down in the hold. The idea being is they really don't want them to fall off. It doesn't happen too often, but of course it happens every once in a while. They lose about 1,500 crates every single year, which I know sounds like I just contradicted myself. But trust me, compared to the millions upon millions of crates that end up getting moved, it's less than a 0.01% failure rate. Now, going back to the longshoremen for just a minute, I love seeing them work. They're oftentimes very friendly, will sometimes say hi to us as they come across. Now, the longshoremen, like I said, they have that pretty difficult job, but because of the short hours that they work, like I said, only about 2 hours up in that crane, a lot of people really, really want that job. It also comes with a very nice 6-figure salary. So because of that, a lot of people really, really want that job, but it is one of the hardest jobs to get out there, period. And that is because not only do you have to be incredibly qualified, but you also have to be lucky. Just to be able to become a longshoreman, just for the interview, you are put into a lottery. About 1,500 people will apply, and only 300 will be chosen to be fully to have that interview. And the interview will be conducted at the very top of the crane. And I am not talking about the glass box, but they are currently sitting at. Follow the staircase even higher up to the very apex of the crane. That's where the interview is conducted. If you have any fear of heights whatsoever, it will certainly show themselves right then and there. Now, like I said, they do lose cranes every once in a while. It's not super common, and it's never going to happen in the nice calm waters of the Puget Sound and Elliott Bay. But when you're out in the Indian, Atlantic, or even Pacific Ocean, and things can get a little dicey out there. Those 60-foot waves sometimes, big storms, that's when things start to fall off. There was actually a famous story that happened, a bit of a tragic incident. What happened was back in 1992, a ship was bound for Tacoma coming from Hong Kong, and they were experiencing a huge storm with 60-foot waves to the point where they were experiencing a 50-degree list. That means it passed that magic 45 and was more to its side than it was upright. When this happened, a bunch of containers broke off and fell into the water, some of them bursting open upon impact due to the sheer height that they fell from. And what spilled out was 28,000 rubber ducks. There were a bunch of rubber ducks stored inside that crate, which then spilled all over the entire ocean and made it the world's largest bathtub. It also made it a very interesting opportunity for oceanographers who were able to set up a hotline so that anybody in the world could call in where they found these rubber ducks. And doing so, they made one of the most accurate maps of ocean currents to this very day. It's even how they found the Pacific garbage patch. Now, these rubber ducks were found in all sorts of crazy places. Of course, a good number of them turned up in our very own harbors here in Seattle, some of them off the coast of Alaska, but then some crazy ones showed up all the way over in China, Japan, Australia, and even 15 years after the initial crash. A single rubber duck washed up on the shores of Scotland, United Kingdom in 2007. Now, all the crates that you see off here to the right are actually empty. They don't have anything in them, and that's because we're more of an import city than we are an export. There's no money to be had in shipping something that has nothing inside of it, so because of that, these are just kind of waiting to be given a job. They're going to get one of two jobs. One of them is going to be bought by the city itself. Starbucks has even purchased a couple of these and made drive-through Starbucks locations, and you can actually go online right now and buy one of these crates for about $2,500 or about $5,000 if you want it fully furnished. People have made put 4 or 5 of these together and made luxury and make like little makeshift apartments out of them. So it is a pretty viable way to do things, but they also have another job that I mentioned, and that's just waiting for another container ship. It will eventually, once there are enough of them, they will just ship an entire one of them full of just the empty ones all the way back to most likely China. Now we're going over into Coast Guard Sector Puget Sound. The first vessel you'll see is that big black and red one. That's the Polar Sea. That one is completely mothballed, but before it was taken out of commission, it was the most powerful non-nuclear icebreaker in the entire world. Nowadays, it gives all of its parts to its sister ship, the Polar Star, as opposed to the Polar Sea. That's the number 12 Polar Star. It's not currently in port right now. It's probably heading up to Antarctica to be shredding through about 7-foot thick ice. It's a Coast Guard icebreaker, so it needs to be shredding through that ice to clear shipping lanes and do research on global warming. Now we're crossing over into the Stadium District of Seattle. We have 2 stadiums here. We have the T-Mobile Park, that's where the Seattle Mariners play. It's our baseball stadium. And they have a very interesting stadium. It's one of the most expensive single-use stadiums in the entire country, costing over $375 million to make, and that's mostly due to the convertible roof, which was a pretty good chunk of it. $65 million just to make the roof. Why was the roof so expensive? Because it's entirely convertible. The roof is able to close up and prevent the games from getting rained out should it start raining here in Seattle. You kind of have to have a rain prevention method here in Seattle if you want to have any sort of sports at all. The Lumen Stadium off to the left also has a rain prevention method in the form of 2 overhangs that hang out along the tops of the roofs there. They protect the fans from getting rained on, but they really don't do a whole lot for the players themselves. It kind of leaves an opening right in the center for the players to get rained on. But it also makes it a very interesting acoustics issue because all of the noise that is generated by the fans will end up going up and bouncing off the sides of those roofs and going directly into the center of the stadium. It makes it incredibly loud in there. In terms of decibel levels, it's compared to having a Boeing 747 jet take off right next to you. It is so loud, in fact, that in 2011, then running back for the Seattle Seahawks, Marshawn Lynch made an incredible 68-yard touchdown against the New Orleans Saints, breaking tackle after tackle. And with each passing yard, the fans were getting louder and louder, cheering, roaring and stomping, to the point where when he dove into the end zone, the nearby University of Washington... You probably see where I'm going with this. They had it open exactly 1 week before everything shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Last I checked, they're at about 90% capacity. Oh, I'm glad that she's finally back in port. I mentioned earlier that we saw just a tiny little cruise ship. That was the Regatta when we saw it over back at Pier 66 when we first pointed them out. But now we get to see one of the biggest cruise ships in the entire world. This is the Ovation of the Seas off here to the starboard side. It is the 5th longest cruise ship in the entire world, and it operates under Royal Caribbean International. Now, some of the cool amenities that come with this, of course, you are basically on your floating city. You can basically do anything you want there. But also, one of the ones I want to highlight, look towards the top of the boat. Off the back of it, you'll see that there is an anchor symbol at the very top of the rope ribbon. Look just a little bit down from that. You see a plexiglass tube there. That's an indoor skydiving arena. It's absolutely insane what you can do on some of these vessels. And in order to power that said vessel, it takes a lot of energy, as you can imagine. They actually hook up to the city's power grid whenever they're at shore. It's something called a shore tie. They pay taxes on it and saves a lot of fuel when they're instead of running those very expensive, very hungry generators. Now, these two cruise ship terminals are Pier 90 and 91 respectively, and they were built just after the first one that you saw all the way back when the Regatta was in port. Because we were not expecting to get nearly as much cruise ship business as we did. We built that first one in the 2000s, and these ones came around 2010 or so. We didn't expect to see that much cruise ship because we don't exactly have a Caribbean climate. We only operate those cruise ships about 6 months out of the entire year because our winters are very, very harsh, very rainy, lots of wind, not fun for cruise ship passengers. But we ended up being the 3rd busiest cruise ship port in the entire world, having to build even more than the ones you see right now. We have 2 more slated to be built near the Eastern Waterway, which I'll be pointing out a little bit later in our tour, which is good because I have seen up to 6 cruise ships in port, 3 of which just had to sit out and anchor and wait for the other ones to get out of the way. But now, folks, I want to direct your attention to the left side of the boat for the first time on our entire tour here because we have an absolutely gorgeous shot of the skyline. Once again, folks, you are not restricted to your seats. If you want to get up and move around to get a better shot of that said skyline, I absolutely implore you to do so. Now, I promised I would talk about the Space Needle when we got a bit of a better look at it, and now took a 2.1 magnitude earthquake with its epicenter in the dead center of the Lumen Stadium. At first, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They're like, there's no way that humans could generate so much noise that they literally rock the earth. But just in case, they decided to put some seismographs inside the stadium, 7 of them to be in fact, and kept tabs on it. And they noticed a trend that every single time that they detected seismic activity, it could be attributed directly to key moments in Seahawks games. Nowadays, the Jumbotron will occasionally flash on and show you those seismographs so the fans can see just how loud that you can get. I do have one more building I want to point out to you folks. I promised a friend a little earlier that I pointed out, and that's going to be the L.C. Smith Tower. That's the white building, the kind of lonely little white building with the beige pyramid on top, as well as the little ballpoint pen-like little glass thing at the very, very top. That is one of the oldest buildings in the entirety of the skyline. In fact, it is our oldest skyscraper. It was built in 1914, and when it was originally built, this was the tallest building in Seattle. Not just that, but the tallest building west of the Mississippi River. Really gives you an idea of how far Seattle has come in the past 100 years. If you go there nowadays, though, if you're wondering what that pyramid at the top is, it's a really cool speakeasy style bar. At the very base of the pyramid is where that bar is. If you're looking for a good bar with really, really nice views, it's about $19 to go up there. I really recommend checking it out, especially at sunset. But I bet you're wondering what the pyramid itself is, though, because that speakeasy bar is only the base of the pyramid. The rest of the pyramid is entirely reserved for an apartment, a luxury apartment at the very top of the tower. It goes for about $17,000 a month, and I hear rumors that you can actually see the space. You can see into the Lumen Stadium and see all the Seahawks playing from the top of that glass dome there. It's a reading room, and you can look directly into the Lumen Stadium. The person currently lived there was able to talk it down to only $13,000 a month, so what a steal. We're coming back over to our Coleman docks. This is the downtown district for the Washington State Ferries. You've no doubt seen them darting across back and forth our entire tour here. If you see these tiny little greenhouse-like buildings, that's where that Coleman docks are. But these docks are not exactly typical. They have a bunch of black pilings there and not a whole lot of cleats or anything to tie lines to. And that's because Washington State Ferries are on a very strict schedule, and slowing down is not in that schedule. Instead, opting to go idle head speeds and crash directly into the dock, and those black pilings prevent them from doing any long-term damage. They only tie up a couple of lines, lower a very elongated ramp, get everybody off, everybody back on, and back the same way they came. They're symmetrical in nature, so they don't need to turn around. They can just shut off one side of the boat, walk over to the other side, turn on those engines, and back the same way they came. With that, folks, it looks like we have made our journey all the way back to Pier 55, which does bring an end to our tour. So I have to go run downstairs and tie up the boat, because as much fun as it would be to pretend to be a Washington State ferry, I don't want to crash directly into the dock. I'm going to go and tie up the vessel so we can get it nice and safely. And if you guys have any questions whatsoever, I'll be the last face you see as you disembark the vessel on the starboard side, the opposite side that you boarded today. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been Sean. Have a great rest of your day, folks. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks, Sean, for the great tour. Hope you all had fun out on the boat with us. We are approaching our dock here back at Pier 55, and we'll be into the dock in just a moment. And Sean does a fantastic job, gives a lot of great information, and works really hard to keep you entertained and informed. But if you do have any further questions for Sean, he will be there at the gate as you step off the boat. That'd be a great time to ask any further questions that you have, or maybe get some recommendations, places to eat here in Seattle, or other things to go and do while you're here. But definitely let Sean know if you enjoyed his tour. Also, before you leave the boat, take a moment, look around your seats, gather up all your personal belongings. Don't leave any hats or coats, cameras, cell phones, credit cards. Definitely close out those credit card tabs there at the bar, and make sure you take all that stuff with you. We are going to go out and do another trip right after this one, and it is difficult to get that stuff back to you if we're not here at the dock. And we are going to be boarding our next group of passengers at the same time that you're exiting the boat. And they're going to board on the port side and make their way up the forward stairs. So we're going to close down the forward stairwells. And we do ask that you make your way down the back stairs, down to the first deck, and then exit off the right-hand side. Once we're fully secure and it is safe for you to step off the boat, I'll get back on the microphone and let you know.